What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, February 20th, 2020. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. So let's get right on into it. Obviously, last night was the Democratic debate from Las Vegas. And Claire described it as a circular firing squad, but I tend to disagree because basically it was Bloomberg who was there with the blindfold and the cigarette. They really went after him. And Bloomberg clearly was not prepared. He certainly was not as well prepared as the other people up on the stage. Of course, he lacks debate experience. He's never had to really do this at this level before. And so the consensus opinion among observers is he basically imploded that night. Last night, rather, and he may have just blown $500 million on absolutely nothing here. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders came out ahead, looking really good, pushing his ideas for universal health care, even though, let's be honest, it's a little impractical. How are they going to pay for it all? Unless they can get the pharmaceutical companies to cut back on drug prices, or unless they can get the medical establishment to go back from a for-profit operation to a service operation, it's going to be prohibitively expensive. Okay, so story out of Iberia Times. Nevada Democratic debate gets heated. Warren attacks Bloomberg about women. Sanders wins. And Warren had this comment about describing as an arrogant billionaire who calls women as fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And it is amazing. Bloomberg has said a lot of really borderline offensive things in the past, and it's all coming back to haunt him. Story coming out of Zero Hedge saying basically that if last night doesn't knock him out of the race, nothing will. My gut is telling me that Bloomberg is going to stick in the race a little bit longer and see what happens after Super Tuesday. Okay, so another article, this one from the Investment Watch blog, saying this is the moment when the Bloomberg campaign absolutely imploded on itself. So yeah, pretty much everybody is saying the same thing. He was clearly not prepared. You could see him struggling. I was looking at his body language, and he had his hands clasped in front of him all night, which I know I do the same thing here. But to me, it came across as he's very nervous, and he's doing this because otherwise he'd be fidgeting with the rest of his hands. And I can fidget because I'm on radio and most of you can't see me. So anyway, Sanders and Bloomberg traded barbs over their respective heart conditions. And Bloomberg went after Bernie Sanders saying, you're a millionaire with 3 houses. And Sanders tried to justify it saying, well, I got to have one in Washington and I got to have one at my main residence. And he shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have gone on the defensive at that point because Bloomberg was already struggling at that point. And of course, they went on and made a case about Klobuchar blowing the name of the Mexican president. So Klobuchar was attacking Buttigieg, saying, you trying to say that I'm dumb. Now, I do have a comment here. Buttigieg actually came across very well. But again, I think there are going to be a lot of people uncomfortable with him being gay. And it may cost us because he did come across very well. And there is the other problem that as president, he would have to deal with representatives from a lot of countries where gays are discriminated against openly, where homosexuality is actually illegal. And even with the facade of diplomacy, it might increase the sense of tension and friction. Anyway, we ran our own poll at the whatreallyhappened.com website, who won the Democratic debate, and the results came out. Bloomberg, 5 votes, Buttigieg, 7 votes, Klobuchar, 3 votes, Sanders, I'm sorry, I was misreading it. Biden had 5 votes, Bloomberg had 7 votes, Buttigieg had 3 votes, Klobuchar had 8 votes, Sanders had 36 votes, Warren had 9 votes. That was the result of our little poll here. And I should learn how to do cut and paste a little bit better here. Okay, now Bloomberg has already broken his promise that he made back in 2018, saying that if he ran for president, he was going to sell his media empire. Well, the plans have changed, and he's keeping his media empire, and his media empire obviously is helping to push him for the presidency. And he is saying that if he wins the presidency, he will put his media empire into a blind trust. See what happens. Personally, I think after last night that his campaign is in a decline. So, and as far as Warren is concerned, Pocahontas is concerned, here we are. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network and getting back on here. Apparently, Michael Bloomberg is paying people $2,500 a month to say nice things about him on social media. And he's basically hired this army of low-level digital strategists, which means just kids at home, I guess, according to the Wall Street Journal, to help spread the good word about him on social media ahead of Super Tuesday. I bring you the good word of Michael Bloomberg. On the keyboard here. And apparently Bloomberg is implanting paid lawyers in attorney general's offices to advance his agenda. And Illinois is one of the states where he did that. And Bloomberg money currently funds the salaries of special assistant attorneys general in 10 Democratic attorney general offices, according to Fox News. There is no indication how many SSAGs are implanted in the office of Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. What's problematic is the arrangement through which a private organization or individual can promote an overtly political agenda by paying the salaries of government employees. So you have people working in the Attorney General's office who are not being paid by the state. They're being paid by Michael Bloomberg. That, I think, is a practice that has to be put an end to. That's absolutely crooked. Absolutely. Bloomberg's past gaffes are continuing to surface. Apparently, at one point, he was caught on tape saying a transgender man is just some guy wearing a dress. So it's technically correct, but dismissive at the same time here. All righty. Now, Donald Trump had a rally in Arizona, and there's no questioning it. He gives good rally. He really does. And in fact, he was just on TV just a little while ago talking about Roger Stone. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But apparently, Trump supporters carried this World War II veteran into the stadium to see President Trump. Guy was in a wheelchair, and there was a video of them literally just all these guys carrying this guy down the stairs to get him into a seat here. Trump noticed and made a point of honoring the veteran during the talk. That was one of the high points of that rally here. All right, apparently, Trump is on a clemency spree. He is handing out clemency to 11 people on Tuesday, including several women of color who were granted relief from excessively long prison sentences. And the media basically kind of ignored it while they're still out there saying, Trump is corrupt and white-collar crime and blah, 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 blah. Which, of course, is why you're here listening to this show instead of ABC, BS, NBC, Fox, whatever. Okay. Lisa Page is spouting off about Bill Barr amid the continuing Beltway rumors he was, notes the past tense, considering resigning over Trump's tweet. Now, again, a Department of Justice spokesperson has come on out and said, no, it's not true. He has no intentions of resigning. I mean, if he were to resign right now, it would be interpreted by certainly the Democrats to indicate guilt. So Barr needs to stay where he is. And I think the greatest evidence that Barr is for real is the panic we're seeing in Washington, D.C. They're in total meltdown over there. They want him gone. They want an attorney general who will obediently ignore the deep state. Now, President Trump had a morning tweet storm about Barr and the Department of Justice, asserts his presidential authority and says there must be justice. And the tweet storm followed the leaks Tuesday night to the media that Barr was considering resigning over Trump's tweets, which he'd complained about in a recent interview. Well, somebody took that interview and said, well, you know, it looks to me like he's thinking about resigning. And apparently that's how it got started. Barr himself, according to the spokesperson, Barr himself did not say, I'm thinking of resigning. Somebody just threw that in there. Again, the corporate media does not report the news anymore. They're out there trying to manufacture the news, trying to manufacture buzz. Now, the other day we were talking about this so-called emergency meeting of federal judges over Attorney General Barr and Trump. That meeting has now been postponed indefinitely after they were outed by Trump. So it looks like coup version 2.0 has died before it even really got to draw breath here. All right, a little while ago, the judge in the Roger Stone case sentenced him to 40 months in prison. That's 3 years and 4 months. And Trump just went on TV talking about this and saying, well, at least it's not the 7 to 9 years they were talking about. And he's saying that he's not thinking about issuing a pardon at this time because he wants the process to play out. He thinks Stone should get a new trial because of the tainted jury foreperson. And he wants Roger to be exonerated. The implied threat is that if Stone doesn't get a new trial, Trump will in fact pardon him. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Joe in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, I'm hearing all these people, all the pundits and everything, talk about Bloomberg and what a disaster it was, and I don't agree. I think Bloomberg. You know, you have to remember this is a Democratic debate where everybody on the stage is a social justice warrior, butt kisser, politically correct clown. And there was Bloomberg. And I personally, you could see, I mean, he was different than all the others. And I'm not going to say it, but it reminds me of Trump during his debates. That everybody else looked like a political hack, and they were all attacking him. I think the line by Warren that he said, fat broads and horse-faced lesbians, I mean, that's a classic. And I think what the political people do is they watch these debates and they think they're like college social justice warriors and they give points based on that political philosophy, yet they don't know the average voter, the middle American voter, the average guy, the assembly line labor Democrat. And they missed that. And I think that actually Bloomberg did pretty well in that the others show themselves to be so out of touch and far left. And he did a great job of, first of all, being attacked by a bunch of leftist crazies and getting that maybe pity type thing going for him, which is hard for a billionaire to actually generate. But at the same time, he was the different one. You know, and that's what he's appealing to. I don't like Bloomberg, but I think of all of them, I mean, to me, he's the most appealing as far as like somewhat. I mean, stop and frisk. Okay, let's all jump on him about stop and frisk. Well, I got to tell you, as somebody that's been mugged in New York, you know, 3 times in 6-month period, back when I was growing up and drinking a lot. I can understand like stop and frisk. I mean, to tell you the truth, if they had stop and frisk in Chicago, it would probably save more young black lives than anything else. And you know, and so I think that the Democrats are showing the other candidates by attacking Bloomberg on this are actually showing their extremism. Now, there's only one Bernie. And Bernie's going to get all the lefty socialist social justice warriors. But guys like Buttigieg and Blochar and whatever, I think it's the same mistake they're making that the Republicans made with Trump. And, you know, they're all outraged by Trump saying about Mexicans and all the outrage about, and most Americans are tired of this outrage culture. We're just, you know,
yes.
And like I said, I see the same thing. And most of the stuff they're outraged about are actually reasonable. I mean, like I said, there's Warren at a national debate bringing up his comment about horse-faced lesbians. I mean, what the hell? I mean, people make comments like that. I think it's clever. I mean, even with Trump and his lying dog-faced pony soldier, I like a clever turn of phrase. And I'm kind of like, it's a good for a little bit of laugh. And I just, once again, I'm not buying all this about what a disaster it was for Bloomberg. I mean, if you score things politically like what a disaster this is and he'll never survive this, Trump would never be president. And I think we're in a new age now where the political correct stuff, the only people that still believe in it and practice it are these like talking heads on TV and the political class, whereas America has moved beyond that. And I think that's what you're going to see. And I think that last night was a victory in that Bloomberg separated himself from all the others. And I think that's a victory for him. And I think, obviously it is his first debate, and I think he did well. I think it's going to show up that he did well. That's just my opinion, and that's what I'm going to say.
Okay, well, he did well for a first-time debater, but when you reach the level of presidential politics, there's an expectation that you've debated before and that you have more experience. And I think the impression I got was that Bloomberg was talking at the audience while the others were talking to the audience. And it's a very, very subtle distinction, but it has to do with that connecting with that audience. And Bloomberg was put on the defensive early on and was pretty much kept there for the entire debate. Obviously yours is a unique opinion. Even Bloomberg said that stop and frisk got out of control. We're talking about 5 million people, blacks and browns, who were randomly stopped and searched in the streets. That's police state stuff. And, a lot of people were very upset about it. They didn't really catch all that many inappropriately armed people with that stop and frisk. It was just a way of repression and harassment. And even though Bloomberg himself didn't actually start that practice, he certainly expanded it. And now he admits it got out of control.
Well, I mean, I got stopped and frisked years ago when I was living in Virginia. I had a Virginia license plate. And anytime you got pulled over, I was speeding. But in Maryland, Maryland told their police, because the Virginia wouldn't go along with their 1 gun a month policy or something, to stop and frisk anybody with Virginia license plates. And they were searching me for drugs. And I was kind of pissed because the cop really squeezed my nuts like really hard. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing? So I never forgive him for that. But at the same time, I'm a white guy, and that's just the way it is, I mean, I'm not happy about it, but, it's the same, like I said. I mean, how many people were, I think that in certain areas maybe, like where crime's out of control, I don't know. I mean, I think they should come up with more of a technical solution, like having a gun that's a radar gun or something that can sense a big hunk of metal, so we can do away with the racial issues. But, I have an attitude that when we do finally get like robot police and it's not possible for them to be racist because they're robots, there's going to be an inordinate amount of people the black people that are going to be having issues with the police, because there's definitely more criminal activity amongst blacks, and whether that's because of poverty or whatever, we can discuss it another time. But they'll be saying that the robots are racist and the robot programs are racist. And, I don't know. Once again, I don't think he should apologize for it. I wouldn't. And I think it'll help him politically. It's like Sister Soldier. It's like people are tired of the Democrats that coddle criminals, and I think that if you want to be out of the mainstream of the crazy Democrats, this is how you do it. And I think he should stand. And if there is one weakness I see in him, is not backing his record. He was not that bad of a mayor in New York.
Okay, well, Joe, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a reminder that Republic Broadcasting is in the middle of a fundraising drive. And I cannot stress how dire the situation is. And I got to tell you, it's a humiliating experience to have to stand out by the side of the road with my little cardboard sign, "We'll broadcast the truth for food." So if you can contribute, please. The postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. All right, getting on back to the news here. We're talking about the Roger Stone sentencing and when and if Donald Trump will pardon him. Certainly that thread is sort of dangling over the issue of a new trial. All righty, apparently Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who's definitely an anti-Trumper, enters letters in the Roger Stone sentencing case file that praise the judge, attack Trump and Barr. One letter bragged of burning the U.S. flag when Trump was elected. And apparently these are letters by seemingly random Trump haters who write in praise of the judge while also spinning Trump-Barr conspiracy theories, likely picked up by nonstop watching of MSNBC. One letter writer bragged they burned an American flag given to them by a veteran when Trump was elected. Okay, I have a lot of issues with the current government of the United States of America, but I'm still an American, and I'm proud of the country and its people, if not the leadership. And I'm opposed to the idea of burning the flag, because when you burn the flag, you're burning the good along with the bad. And at this point in history, despite how dire things may look, the good still outweighs the bad. For that reason, we should respect that flag. It doesn't represent just the government. It represents all of us. We should remember that. Okay, so anyway, we talked about a 40-month sentence, which was closer to what Barr wanted than the prosecutors wanted. Meanwhile, Durham is really cranking up his investigation into the special counsel's activities. He's interviewed several FBI investigators who worked on Mueller's team, according to investigative reporter Paul Sperry. Okay, President Donald Trump is naming U.S. Ambassador to Germany Richard Grinnell to the acting director of national intelligence. Now, this is very controversial because Richard Grinnell has zero intelligence experience. And already there are people out there saying, well, this is a bad thing. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe Trump is finally wising out that he's got to start filling these slots with people who don't have prior experience, who haven't been contaminated by the intelligence culture into thinking that they and not the civilian leadership should run this country. Look at some of what the intelligence agencies have been doing, like running drugs. Maybe somebody from the outside is a good idea. I certainly think so. I'm not just saying that because I wanted to head up NASA. A little bit of history is starting to surface here. Apparently, Obama's Justice Department took proceeds that were intended to benefit homeowners harmed during the 2008 financial crisis, nearly $1 billion per congressional records, and used these settlements to directly fund left-wing political organizations and their allies. I think that comes under the heading of embezzlement, or certainly misappropriation of funds. All right, James Clyburn, who's a Democrat, is attacking Trump for the recent comments about how unemployment among the black population is at a record low. And he's saying, absolutely not. I mean, all blacks were working back when slavery was there. Well, Clyburn, you've got a point there. Let's bring back slavery, and that will end the black unemployment problem, won't it? They really don't think these things through. I mean, that was a singularly inappropriate thing for him to say. It really, really was here. Okay, little article that came out of Zero Hedge, The Intolerance of the Tolerant Left, the End of Liberal Democracy. And what they're talking about here is the two recent events which seem to indicate that the tolerant left has become very intolerant. They're resorting to violence. And if you look in the what happened over in Germany of Thuringia, the left-wing groups following the election of the state premier went violent here. Then you had Nancy Pelosi publicly ripping up U.S. President Donald Trump's State of the Union address. That was an official document. It does not belong to her personally. It belongs to the people, and she is merely its custodian. And I think that was a Title 18 violation right there. So it's amazing to see the liberal Democrats still out there insisting that conservatives are the danger to America. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones to Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Michael, I would like to talk about Michael Bloomberg's meteoric rise as a contender in the Democratic Party. Now, Bloomberg has an ego as large as Donald Trump's. And
don't they all?
Yeah. And now listen, I had said a while ago that, politically in the States, it seems like, Trump's a shoe-in on the Republican, nothing's happening there. So really we should pick who the Democrat contender is. So then if Trump does, for some reason, lose, we at least have some influence on who the Democratic candidate. Now, Mike Bloomberg, with his totally inflated ego, may be actually just playing flank to help Donald Trump get in. In a sense, as part of what I would call Operation Knockout Bernie. Because the number one thing billionaires hate, although they never say it, is they hate graduated income taxes. They don't want to pay their taxes. And you hear them every once in a while. Remember, Mike Bloomberg said a week ago, I'm for taxing the wealthy more. Bill Gates has said it. Warren Buffett has said it. Remember about 2 years ago, Zuckerberg said him and his wife were going to give away most of their wealth. Remember that?
I remember that.
And so far, they're all holding on to all their money. So now here it is, Mike Bloomberg, about a week ago, he came out and said, the rich should pay more taxes. Now, the fact of the matter is, if the rich wanted higher taxes on the rich, it would have already happened because the rich run the world. And that's been proven by that article out of Princeton by Page and Gillens, two researchers, who really prove that we live in an oligarchy ruled by the rich.
Yes.
So what we're seeing here with, I think, Mike Bloomberg is tacitly flanking for Trump. They might totally be in on it, because why would Bloomberg go up against Trump directly in the Republican Party? He could do that with his money, but he's not. Because why? He prefers Trump over Bernie. And actually, it's pretty obviously that Bloomberg is a political animal just thinking about climbing up the rungs of power, because he used to be the Republican mayor of New York City. So he'll switch parties in a second for political expediency. So to conclude is, I think this is all just kabuki theater, and he's buying his way to get rid of, and he's probably part of, all the other elitist Democrats. They're not going to admit it at first. But the fact of the matter is, the most hated person in the Democratic Party is Bernie Sanders, because he's relatively honest. And if you've heard my calls before, I said that he has no record of being a criminal. That remember what Harry Truman said, that you can't get rich in politics unless you're a crook. And as Bernie said in the debate last night, just because he owns 3 houses, he's not rich. He's not rich. You can be a millionaire and own 3 houses, just have $1 million. And by the way, that's standard retirement packages for most boomers. You should have $1 million. The fact that yeah. Okay.
I've fallen short on that one.
Well, if you think of Bernie, I've done the math on your show, I believe, where it was, he makes about $150,000 a year over 30 years. Yeah. And that's $4.5 million. And then you take out a third, and that's $3 million. And he's known to be worth only $2.5 million, proving and his wife worked also. at college where she was somewhat corrupt. But still, that's on her. And the fact he's only worth $2.5 million shows Bernie Sanders is an honest man, and he's going to want graduated income tax. So what you're seeing is all the wealthy ganging up on Operation Knockout Bernie. And on that note, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And it's an interesting theory, but I don't see Bloomberg as the sort of person who's going to sort of partner covertly with Donald Trump to knock out Bernie Sanders. In any event, he's failing miserably because the polls are showing Bernie way, way ahead. There are 3 of the states coming up for Super Tuesday where Sanders and Bloomberg are neck and neck. But I think after last night's lackluster performance, we may see the numbers swing back toward Bernie Sanders. Let's go back to the phone to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I definitely agree with Joe from Tennessee about Bloomberg is right about crime and what he says is true. Frankly, he's a despicable sexual harasser and things like that, and he's a diehard, the most diehard maybe opponent of the Second Amendment. He's a complete Zionist shill. And that's what I'm against him for, that and the Second Amendment. But it's if he's a stalking horse for anybody, I believe it's Hillary. He's a guy that doesn't mind Wall Street, which of course are his tribesmates, and he's also a stalking horse for the Zionists and AIPAC, and AIPAC is lined up against Bernie as well. Make note of that, everybody. AIPAC is all over getting rid of Bernie. Okay,
yes,
another Jewish guy. So we're going to have our choice could very well end up being Donald Trump, the king of the Jews, as he self-proclaims. We could have a billionaire oligarch, Second Amendment troll Bloomberg, or socialist, also Zionist Bernie. Those are our choices that are the most prominent so far. I also want to point out with the I believe I sent you the article, although nobody comes out and says it outright. It looks like this guy, Richard Grenfell, who's now the director of national intelligence, the head of the NSA and the CIA and FBI, everybody reports to him, is probably Jewish. The story that I sent you earlier talks about a sign he had in his kitchen about praying for Israel. I mean, like who has that who's not Jewish? But they're being very, very silent about it. But there's all sorts of articles in Haaretz and the Jerusalem Post and Jewish News and Jewish Life. They're all over that. So I'm pretty sure they're being quiet about it, but that he is. He's certainly an ardent Zionist, a complete ardent Zionist. And I don't believe you could have that position anymore without being that way, just like you can't get to be the Secretary of the Treasury without being Jewish, or you really can't be the head of the Federal Reserve without being Jewish. And a lot, and now even the chief of staff going back is like it's now trending as it's a good thing to be Jewish there too. To the White House, as a chief of staff to the president. But I want to point out that we talked about this before as well, way back when, before the 2016 elections. Obama and the Obama Justice Department was caught fining companies. And we talked about how they shake down companies yesterday. But they were fining companies for one thing and offering to withdraw the charges or investigations of these companies. This is the Holder and Loretta Lynch White House, Justice Department guys. And then they would, or they could donate to Antifa or Black Lives Matter, which, of course, right after the election, and of course, George Soros and his biggest funder, they got tons of money from that, and it provided Obama and Hillary with their own army. All those riots were Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They were funded by Soros. They were funded by Obama, who was extorting money to put into their coffers. Do you remember that?
I remember that. And don't forget the story we talked about just a little earlier where they were diverting money that was supposed to be helping homeowners back in 2008. That was going to these leftist groups and their allies.
Yeah. So I mean, they're it's like funding their own brown shirts,
Yes.
and they've been doing it for a while, and that's why that these people are always. There's plenty of fascist Democrats too, but they never get called out. I mean, Mike, it's pretty apparent, and watch and see about this Grenfell guy. You cannot be the head of intelligence anymore unless you're an ardent Zionist, which is the most prominent thing in this guy's political history as an ambassador to Germany and blah blah blah. That's the most prominent thing in his resume, really. He worked for pro-Israel stuff. I looked it all up this morning. But I sent you the article that talks about the sign in his kitchen that his mother put up, which leads me to, my mother never put up anything like that. I'm sure you didn't either, and most people don't who aren't Jewish.
Nope.
But nevertheless, they're being very silent about it. Just like they're silent about, by the way, the head of the NSC, the NSA, National Security Agency, of their counterintelligence for the technical stuff is an ardent Zionist. So it just goes on and on and on. So that's the one thread that runs through all of Trump's appointments. Is that they can do? There's a little bit of political diversity on everything else except that. He never ever appoints anybody who questions Israel. And by the way, how about the pardon of that guy Kirkuk, the former commissioner of police in New York, who was the commissioner at the time of the 9/11 thing, and 2 weeks earlier, by the way, had met with, gone to Israel and gotten a $250,000 interest-free loan from some Israeli billionaire 2 weeks before the 9/11 attacks. And he's the commissioner of New York, and of course, we all know who the head of Homeland Security was, and we all know who handled the security at Logan Airport and Portland, Maine. I mean, look, it's all this stuff. There's a line going through all of it, and it's at some point we have to confront this. I mean, it has to be confronted, or the term that Gilad Osman uses, "We're all Palestinians." We will be, because all of us have something they may want, and they won't allow anybody to stand in their way. There's no tolerance in them at all.
Well, when I was still married to my first wife, who was Ashkenazi, and I remember being shocked at just how racist her family was, even against other sects of Jews. And this was before I found out I was descended from Sephardic Jews myself, which, good thing I didn't know about it back then, because, her parents would have just immediately gone from liking me to hating me. So, it was like switch would have been thrown here. Anyway, Pete, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say about the racism thing, how several years ago they were caught clandestinely, secretly sterilizing, unknowingly, the Ethiopian and falafel Jews in Israel and trying to deport them. They were actually sterilizing them. I mean, they're as racist as it gets, and it extends to you and I. So,
yes, it does.
Whatever.
We're so conditioned to not be racist ourselves and to, not discriminate against others, that we're blind to the fact that we ourselves are being discriminated against, and that we are the victims of racism as well.
Oh, my Lord. I sent you something by that Red Ice guy about all the attacks that are now a pattern, where they force Swedes, of course, white Swedes, all these North African and Arab immigrants, and sub-Saharan as well, to perform fellatio on them. They'll humiliate them. They'll beat them up, rape them, men as well, pee on them. And the peeing on them thing is now a trend.
Yes.
It's a trend. It's a humiliation thing, and they hate us. Look, they're not there to they're not there to integrate themselves. They're there to take over. And it's at some point, I would never put up with that, and for my child or my children or for anybody. So whatever. There you go.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for the phone call, and we're going to switch over to Fred in Iowa. Fred, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Oh, a lot, but I'm going to be very short, Mike. I've been saying, and I still maintain it, that Trump will be reelected because we're being manipulated. I think it's rather important that people should know who the head oligarch is, or the head of the banking and all the initial companies and outfits. But the little horn controls banking. Thank you and have a good day.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the news here. Apparently up in Wisconsin, Supreme Court Justice Kelly has trounced the Democrats in a nonpartisan primary. This may be an indicator of what's really going to happen come November. So anyway, got an email here responding to Peter, and it says, Stadmiller's whole show yesterday was listing all the famous Jews that we never knew were. It took up the whole show. Wow. Okay. All righty. Let's talk about the COVID-19 virus. It's in the news again, and apparently deaths have now topped 2,100. And China has announced that the World Health Organization can go into China now, but they can't go to the source of the outbreak. Now, whether they mean the fish market or the entire city of Wuhan was not made explicitly clear in this article. But obviously, the World Health Organization has a good reason to go to the source in order to verify it's the source. And if, in fact, the source of this virus is the BSL-4 lab and not the fish market, then World Health Organization would immediately know that, because they wouldn't find, any more than the normal background level of the COVID-19 virus at that fish market. At this point, we can assume it's pretty much everywhere. But if the fish market were the hot zone, then it would just obviously spike on the presence of these COVID-19 virus particles here. Now, China is going to once again change the definition of coronavirus, trying to get the number of known cases back down where it was before the last revision, where they went from people who were merely symptomatic. Where they went from people who were confirmed to have COVID-19 through a genetic test to people who were merely symptomatic. And it spiked up the number and panicked everybody, upset the stock market. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Joe in Nome. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, obviously you have a lot of musicians out there in your audience.
I'm married to one.
Well, more power to you.
Thank you.
I kind of assumed that you might also be a musician.
A little.
I think that story about Martin and the Rosewood and embargo or whatever, zealotry of the shakedown was back around 1979.
I don't think it was that far. I think it happened during the Obama years. I could be wrong on that. Somebody call on in and, refine that for me.
Well, I was doing a little bit of guitar building back in '79, and I'm a former pile buck welder, and I was working up in Everett, Washington, at the pulp mill up there, which is a international port, and some of the guys that were taking home pallets, used pallets, discarded pallets, because of their exotic woods involved, had been busted by customs officials. because those pallets hadn't been through customs. But I think that just points out the zealotry of the shakedown. But I may be wrong. It maybe wasn't that far back. Anyway, thanks for bringing up the O2 therapy. As a pile bug, I was trained, commercial diving trained in human physiology, and I even volunteered at Virginia Mason in Seattle. We were compressing goats. So I'm one of those men that stare at goats, or was. But I guess it was about 95 or 6. There was a big brouhaha in the Anchorage Daily News before it joined with the Anchorage Times about MRSA and oxygen, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And what it amounted to was there was a naturopathic doctor that was advocating hyperbaric oxygen, which is pretty new back then.
Yeah, Joe, I'm going to have to put you on hold here. We got to take a station identification break, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're talking with Joe and Noam about goats and hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So, Joe, why don't you just pick up where you left off?
I wanted to thank you for bringing up the piece about effectiveness against viral infection. But getting back to my experience there, I had bought a condo down in Whittier, Alaska, from a doctor, and the Anchorage Times put out this big hit piece on the homeopathic doctor, or naturopathic doctor, excuse me, that was advocating hyperbaric oxygen therapy for MRSA. And this doctor that I had bought this condo from in Whittier, he was written up in the Anchorage Times slamming this naturopathic doctor for this outrageous assertion that hyperbaric oxygen would be effective against MRSA. I listened to KENI back then, because Art Bell was on there, but I listened to a lot of that right-wing tripe that was put out by Rick Rydell. And I went on board there and I didn't use the doctor's actual name, because actually the hit piece that they put in the Anchorage Times gave a false name. And I thought it was pretty ironic that well, I could have exposed him, and I could expose him now too. But at any rate, the first time I ever called you,
yes,
I was asking you a question about a supposed special relationship between Alaska and Hawaii, and you profess to not know anything about that. But what I was basically getting at, of course, the special relationship is obviously our strategic importance to the U.S.
Yes.
And it's my contention that Alaska has been the private playground of the military-industrial pharmaceutical complex for over 100 years.
Well, the same with Hawaii.
Okay, well, there's another, but yeah. The reason why I originally brought that up originally to you about was this $22 million that Stevens and Daniel Inouye had gotten to study UFOs. And although I love listening to you,
Oh my goodness.
I really think that look, I understand that you don't want to kookify your show.
No, I don't. I really don't. We don't do Loch Ness Monster, and we don't do a lot of stuff along that line.
But anyway, we don't have to call them UFOs anymore. Apparently, the Navy calls them UAPs. Anyway, on that note, thanks a lot.
Well, that makes it okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Sebastian in Sweden. Aloha, Sebastian. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. Just something that Peter discussed from Los Angeles Seats, humiliation robberies. There was a Swedish Democrat that said in the parliament today that they should be automatically deportation if that ever happened. Of course, it's not a bill or anything yet because they don't have. It's the Social Democrats and their party members, like the Miljöpartiet, the Green Party, that have most of the parliament right now. In the next 2 years, unless there's a election that comes along before the regular election, which is in 2022. And I want to mention something else that happened a few days ago. They passed a law in the parliament that's going to make it legal for the police and the equivalent to the, I suppose, to the NSA, it's called SEPO in Swedish, to listen to any telephone conversation, or and accordingly, they're going to. I don't know how they're going to do this. I'm not really that technically inclined about telephones. I have a Android, and they're going to somehow download a virus that listens to your phone and looks at the camera or anything they want to do. But I don't understand how they can do it without you knowing it. You must be able. There must be like sending maybe an app from the civil defense. Oh, everybody has to get this app now. I mean, how do they do that without you yourself downloading an app or an email?
Well, they can spoof whatever is updating your software. If they can get you to download an app, or for all we know, it's built into the phones at the point of manufacture. I mean, that certainly is the suspicion here in the United States of America, is that every cell phone has a backdoor built into it through which the software can be modified. And we know there was a landmark Supreme Court case, I think, where the issue of bugging somebody with their own smartphone came up. Was that a legitimate way of collecting court admissible evidence? And I forget how the ruling went. I think the ruling was yes, it was acceptable. So, more than likely it's built into the phone at the point of manufacture.
Yeah, so I have an ordinary Android, like actually it's an LG, but so that means the next phone I should get is Huawei or the Chinese phone, maybe. Huawei, maybe that's more secure then, because we can still buy them here in Sweden.
Well, it's a question of who do you want spying on you, the Chinese or the Americans? Me, I lean toward having the Chinese spy on me because I'm not a threat to them.
Yeah, same here. And there's another thing I want to. There's a suit going on. The state-owned radio station is being sued over discrimination, because they went out and said that all white men are racist. And now they're being sued, so I hope it goes through.
I mean, that right there, in and of itself, that's a racist comment.
Yeah, exactly. You can't. It's like reverse racist. You can't say things like that because it is racist. Okay, well, that's all that was on my mind, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out.
Yeah.
Thank you, I certainly will. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Yeah, all white people are racist, but that's not a racist statement here. Getting on back to the COVID-19 virus, there's a Japanese epidemiologist, Kentaro Iwata. He is a professor at the University Hospital of Kobe University. He spent a day on the Diamond Princess as a volunteer. Now, for those who don't remember, the Diamond Princess is a cruise ship, really big one. And the people on board have been quarantined for 2 weeks. And he went on board and he said it was just absolutely chaotic conditions. And he was saying the cruise ship was completely inadequate in terms of controlling infections. And the bureaucrats were in charge of everything. There's no clear distinction between the green healthy zones and the red potentially infected zones. And the staff is just running back and forth between them, which raises the possibility that rather than controlling the infection, that enclosed environment may have actually resulted in more people being infected. And by the way, a couple who were on the Diamond Princess has died of the COVID-19. But before you start panicking, they had serious pre-existing medical conditions that had compromised their immune systems. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, last December 1st, China enacted a mandatory vaccination law, raising the possibility that the COVID-19 is actually a vaccine experiment got bad, which many people suspect was the origin of the 1918 so-called Spanish flu, which did not come from Spain. It originated at a U.S. military base where vaccine tests were being held. It killed an estimated 50 to 100 million people during the pandemic. Don't suppose the government would lie to us about something. They wouldn't say, we'll just call it the Spanish flu. Get off the hook for having caused this ourselves. Remember the 1979 swine flu vaccine? Killed 50 times more people than the swine flu itself did. They had a mandatory vaccination program. They had to call it off because of all the people dropping dead. Apparently, COVID-19 deaths outside China have surged overnight as a South Korean city faces unprecedented crisis. Over in Japan, thousands are being ordered to work from home as experts warn Japan is on the cusp of a large outbreak themselves. Half of China's population is facing some level of travel restriction due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The Politburo's attempt to get the country back to work has been slow going and fraught with setbacks. Now, interestingly enough, despite all of this, and despite that this COVID-19 seems primarily preying on the ethnic Chinese, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York are still continuing their Chinese New Year's festivals. So, I really don't know. I mean, Chinese New Year is a lot of fun, a lot of fireworks. I would go here. Alrighty, new estimates suggest Chinese tech shipments are about to crash. The problem isn't production. The production facilities seem to be coming back online. The problem is the supply chain. Trucking, shipping, they're all still pretty much shut down because everybody's afraid of interacting with other people over the COVID-19. And I think because of this, the idea that this is somehow China's fault, I don't know. Maybe it was an accident at that BSL-4 lab, but if this was done deliberately, if in fact this was a partly engineered, work-in-progress biological weapon, because as a biological weapon, it's really not that effective. But maybe it was like they were on their way to something and somebody dropped a test tube. If it was being done deliberately, it wouldn't be China. It would be somebody who's afraid of China, who's in contention with China. Now, I wonder who that could be. Who could that be? Meanwhile, the U.S. and China are engaged in an active press war with independent media in the crosshairs. That means me. That means Republic Broadcasting, which is why we need your economic help. All right, let's turn to the international news here. Russia is defeating the U.S. in the Middle East oil game. Historically, Russia goes to great lengths to hide or disguise its strategic intentions. That sounds to me like a propaganda sentence. Out there say, we know Russia's doing bad things. They're nefarious, those people over there. And then that's why we have to preemptively invade all these countries in the Middle East here. And Russia is clearly empowered enough in the Middle East to very obviously stake its claim in the region. Saudi Arabia, by stating that a slew of Russian companies are to spend up to $20 billion with a B on oil projects in Iraq in the near term. Now, since Trump outlined the new U.S. foreign policy of not engaging in conflicts abroad unless they were directly aligned with U.S. interests, and then effectively withdrawing from Syria and from supporting the Kurds, Russia, and China, it felt that they can bring forward their plans to bring Iraq within their geopolitical arc of influence. Well, it's not that Russia and China are bringing the Middle East into their arc of influence. It's that the United States foreign policy has alienated our former friends, and they're looking to make new associations. No nation was ever drawn away that wasn't being driven away. That involves a lot of disruption and a lot of upset. Now here, if you're wondering why defense costs so much money, this next article is going to basically sort that out. The Pentagon Inspector General report finds that some $716 million in equipment that was destined for the Syrian rebels, meaning the jihadis, was simply abandoned and left to rust in the desert. And this came out on February 13th from the leadership of Special Operations Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, which is part of Combined Joint Task Force OIR. And the U.S. military's mission in Syria failed to properly account for nearly $716 million in weapons procured for distribution to U.S.-backed jihadis fighting against the Syrian government. In addition to not maintaining comprehensive lists of all equipment purchased and received, the weapons were stored improperly, allowing them to rust and leaving them vulnerable to theft. That right there is a good example of the waste. Because, hey, it's not like they really care. They know there's always going to be more money. As long as you're out there working and paying your taxes, there's always going to be more money for more goodies for the military. And I got to see some of this hideous spending and waste during my time with NASA, and then later on with Robert Abel and Associates when we were doing a project for Martin Marietta. And it's just, you can't conceive of the flow of money. If your entire income is the kitchen faucet running, the military, they've got fire hoses full of money that just spray it. And they're not careful about where it goes, and they're not careful what that money buys, how it's being taken care of. That's what that story is all about. $716 million. I wonder how many schools could be built for that money. I wonder how many hospitals could be built for that money. How many bridges could be repaired? How many roads could be repaved for $716 million that just went to waste? Anyway, the Syrian air defense is repelling yet another attack on the city of Jabla on the Mediterranean coast in the province of Latakia. This was reported by El Akabaria just yesterday. Air defenses are intercepting hostile targets in the vicinity of the city of Jabla. No reports of casualties or damage. Now, I wonder who could be doing that. The Russian air base, there is a Russian air base, I think, in that city. Whether they were targeted or not, I do not know. All right, Turkey is edging toward a direct war with Syria in the Idlib province. President Erdogan says that the military operation in northwest Syria to expel Syrian forces from Idlib is only a matter of time as Turkey continues to send more troops into the area. Turkey has launched multiple attacks against the Syrian military in the past month, mostly to try to slow Syrian military advances against al-Qaeda. Well, they kind of blew that one because the Syrian army has basically recaptured Idlib at this point. Erdogan has repeatedly demanded Syria abandon the Idlib province to the Islamist groups and now intends to try to directly force this. Now, the Kremlin is slamming Turkey's threat of military operation against Syrian government in Idlib, saying the worst case scenario is, yes, it will result in a direct all-out war between Syria and Turkey. Now, remember, NATO has already gone on record saying they will not supply weapons for such a war. Turkey, meanwhile, is denying the reports of a destruction of a vessel in the port of Tripoli. They're saying that the ship was fired on but survived. And the situation has since calmed down. Amazing here. Now, this video is kind of all over the place here on the internet, and we linked it to our website as well here. Apparently, there was a U.S. military convoy on a highway in Syria, and a Russian military track was trying to pass them because the convoy was going slow, as convoys tend to do. And one of the U.S. vehicles ran the Russian military truck off the road. And I'm sure the diplomats are on the phones right now saying, well, you shouldn't have done that. You should have done this. I mean, that kind of thing leads to shooting, and shooting leads to conflict, and conflict leads to all-out war. That's how close we are. That's how dangerous this whole situation has become. All right, Baghdad is blocking the deployment of the Patriot air defense system. The Pentagon is trying to move one battery from Saudi Arabia to Iraq, but it's stuck in Kuwait, as the Iraqis don't want it. They don't want to let it in. Anybody who thinks we won in Iraq, you got to take a look. Iraq is straining at the leash. They want out. They want the Americans to go home. Yankee, go home. Been there long enough. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Join us on the air, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about Iraq. We're talking about Iraq doesn't want the Patriot missile. And one of the reasons they may be bridling at all of this is, according to a senior Iraqi member of parliament, over 1,000 terrorists have been transferred from Syria to Iraq by the United States. These terrorists came from the eastern regions of Syria to western areas of Iraq, and basically saying this is going to have consequences and dangers. So they definitely do not like that kind of a thing here. I don't know about you, but to me, it does feel like the U.S. really is losing all these wars. They're losing in Syria. They're losing in Afghanistan. They're losing in Iraq. And the only reason they're keeping these wars going is nobody wants to admit we've lost. It's Vietnam all over again. Remember the Pentagon Papers? Pentagon Papers revealed that the U.S. and the Pentagon knew, the U.S. government rather, knew they could not win in Vietnam, and yet the war went on for years and years because nobody wanted to be the one to stand up and say, well, we've lost the war. And it wasn't until Marines were dangling from the bottom of a Huey helicopter flying off the consulate in Hanoi that we finally said, yeah, we kind of blew this one here. The great and mighty United States was defeated by North Vietnam. Anyway, all right. Defender 20 is a large-scale military exercise that has gotten way in recent weeks. And apparently the United States deployed 37,000 soldiers to Germany, Poland, and the Baltic states. And apparently this Defender Europe 20 exercise is supposed to be the largest deployment of U.S.-based soldiers for an exercise to Europe, largest in 25 years. It's a massive exercise that will send U.S. soldiers to the continent to conduct force projection and readiness training to deter potential adversaries. Well, this involves 19 other countries, and they've already hit problems. It's not going off the way they want it to. Whoopsie, little bit of a whoopsie here. Okay, the European Union will deploy warships off of Libya's coast to enforce the UN arms embargo. All of a sudden, Libya is heating up again. And just after the EU's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, urged Europe to develop an appetite for power, don't think I like that phrase very much, to better chart its own independent course in solving international crises, the EU has agreed to deploy warships in order to enforce a UN arms embargo on the war-torn country. The EU has stressed this is not an extension of its prior controversial mission to rescue migrants and refugees in the Mediterranean. Yes, they're on their own here. Speaking of naval ships, the Navy is really starting to work on developing drone ships. These are Navy ships that can be sent into operations without a human crew on board. Maybe they kind of get tired of these very expensive ships ramming commercial tankers and cargo ships. Okay, we're going to take a phone call from Andy in Texas. And Andy, I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Mike, you remember Smedley Butley said that all wars are bankers' wars, or corporate wars, if you will.
Well, he said
so we're not really
he said war is a racket. I'm the one who said all wars are bankers' wars.
Well, I concur with that. But So we're not really losing these wars. Why? Because we get in there long enough to establish all these corporations that are landed there now. Okay, so are they kicking out just the military? Or are they kicking out the entire corporate situation? The corporations are going to probably remain.
Well, I don't know that that's a given. In fact, I would say that if Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq succeed in kicking out the U.S. military, that pressure will be brought to bear on these American corporations to get them out and make room for domestic corporations to take over.
You would think so, but I mean, okay, so in Afghanistan, the opiates, I mean, I guess it was like 3% of the opium was provided by Afghanistan before we got in there. Now it's 93% of the opium is being performed.
Yes.
So, but it's only being protected by the federal government. I guess they could take it back or whatnot, but you've got the Monsantos and all these other different people that have moved in there, the McDonald's corporations, all this stuff. We've democratized these people. And I don't think that a whole lot of that's going away. So did we really lose?
Well, in terms of the official reasons given for the wars, yes, we did. I mean, we went into Iraq to get their weapons of mass destruction, which turned out not to exist, to punish them for 9/11, which even George Bush admitted they had nothing to do with. And if you look at the failure to achieve the stated objectives, then yes, we lost.
Oh, no, I concur. As far as military-wise goes, yes, we did lose. But overall, we gave them, quote, I'm using quotes now, democracy. You see, so did we lose?
We didn't give them anything. We sold it to them at greatly inflated prices. Anyway, Andy, I need you to hang on to the line. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Andy in Texas. And Andy, politics is perception. And while I'm sure that the owners and investors in these various American corporations, assuming they're allowed to stay in these countries that we've invaded, which I seriously doubt, the general American public is going to view these wars in terms of the rationale given for them to get Saddam's weapons of mass destruction and so forth. And on that perception, they will say, yeah, we lost. We absolutely, lost those wars. And right now, the American people are war weary. We have been in a state of constant war with all of these countries going back 19 years when we invaded Afghanistan after 9/11. And so, I really can't say that we've won these wars. Maybe if these corporations are allowed to stay, it's a small victory for them. But for the nation as a whole, we're definitely losing in those countries.
Well, surely we lost as far as what their premise was for going in there. Surely we lost that. But the overall perception was to lay down a new foundation for new governments for all these places. That's why they got rid of the leaders. And
well, wait a minute. If you're talking democracy, isn't it up to the people in those nations to decide what government they want? I mean, we have been ejecting democratically elected leaders in countries and replacing them with despots. Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973. I mean, for all this talk about bringing democracy to these nations, we've never actually done it. We went into Afghanistan, we got rid of the Taliban, which was there with the blessing and support of the Afghani people, and we imposed basically a puppet ruler under Hamid Karzai, El Presidente de UNOCAL.
Well, yeah, no. I'm not trying to dispute that, but what I'm saying is if we look at the overview of what's going on, the years that it's taken to get to where we're at this particular moment, a bunch of our corporations, Western corporations via Europe and the United States, has moved in and put in let's say an internet of different corporations and whatnot that at this particular point would be very hard to get rid of. I mean, perhaps they put down a new communications. Perhaps they brought the 5G to them. Perhaps they did all this stuff. There's a whole bunch of layouts that's been put in there. We've had 16, 18, 19 years, 20 years now of these people being in there and stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. If they're going to kick the American people out, they got to kick out 20 years of production of what we've been doing to them for 20 years and stuff. So what
if they nationalize those corporations? I mean, that would be something that they could do, and simply say, Coca-Cola no longer owns this battling point. My cousin over here owns it.
Well, all I'm saying is, Mike, is that in many respects we did win, because the overall thing, we were in there for the corporations. No, hang on. We were in there for the corporations to get their stuff done, and now they're established. And so if they kick our military out and we come home and Donald Trump's a hero, boom, they still got their establishment there. They got the beginning. They got the genesis of a new everything. So they've changed the entire economy. They've changed the entire outlook. They've changed people's way of living in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya and all these places. They've changed all of that. So we actually did we lose or win? Okay, let's go 50-50 then.
Let me see if I've got this right. We go in and we bomb everything these people have to rubble. Then we sell them a replacement, and you call that victory.
Yeah, because they accepted the settlement. It took them 20 years to kick us out. So they accepted it all the way up till now, and now it's already established. And so we're going to say that's a loss. I don't care if we win or lose. It's a stupid war to begin with. So don't get me wrong. I'm not an advocate for, we're Americans, we won. I'm not an advocate for that. I'm just saying in many respects, what they went in there to do, even if we withdraw today, they still kind of won because they changed this country from what it was to what it is now.
Yeah, but that was none of our business to do. That was up to the people of that country. If you, in fact, believe in democracy, then shouldn't these countries have been left alone? I mean, Mohammad Mossadegh was a democratically elected leader, and the CIA ousted him and imposed the dictator, the Shah of Iran. The same thing down in Chile in 1973. They ejected the democratically elected leader, and they put in the dictator Pinochet. Allende, that was his name.
Did that change things for all these countries since we've done that?
Yeah, it changed it for the worst. The standard of living for the ordinary people went down. Yes, the American corporations profited.
That's my point. No matter what happens, whether we leave today, tomorrow, or yesterday, we've done what we wanted to do. We created a new government that is now in a different fluctuation. And so I'm not saying maybe they don't look at that as a win. I'm not looking at it as a win, but I'm just saying because of all of this that they have done, there's a winner in there somewhere, and it had to do with our inflection of our power in their country and change the way that they work. That's all I'm saying. I don't believe in what we're doing at all.
You who won these wars? The banks did, because all these wars were fought with borrowed money, and the banks are just raking it in. These loans were made at high interest rates because they're high risk investments, and you and your grandchildren and your great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will be paying off these debts. And when the government takes money from you, you're welcome, we're going to let you go. When the government takes your money and they don't spend it on taking care of you, that is called slavery. Let's go back to the phones to Ken in Fort Worth. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, real quick. Roger Stone, go Google Roger Stone books. He's got a bunch of them.
Okay. We'll definitely do that. Anything else?
That's it. I'm gone.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Tom, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day to you, Michael. Yeah, good day. That one caller talked about how the war, nobody wins in a war like that. I mean, come on. And look, that's nonsense. But listen, Michael, did you see the debate last night with Amy Klobuchar and Buttigieg? Do you know what the main thing about that whole debate was, Michael? Ask yourself this. They said that language doesn't count. The English language doesn't count. That's like saying the American flag. We might as well change the American flag now. We might have 10 different flags. We might have 10 different languages in the country. And these communist Bolsheviks, every one of those demon rats on stage are saying, well, English shouldn't be the official language of the country, and an American public could vote for some imbecile like that? Are you kidding me? And then pretty soon you're going to tell you the American flag is racist, stars and bars.
Tom,
I mean, come on.
Tom?
Yeah.
There is legally no official language of the United States of America. it is predominantly English speaking, but there is no law that makes it so. It's just an artifact of our having been colonized mostly by the British.
But okay, Michael, if that's the case, is the United States government, the Congress, does that run in a different language or does it run in English?
It's run in English.
Language?
Okay, your phone connection faded at that point here. There have been requests to declare English our official language, but so far Congress has failed to act.
But Michael, they're debating. In the debate last night, they're debating the language of this country, which we all know is if it's not English, it's what is it going to be? French? German?
Spanish. It's going to be Spanish.
Oh, okay. That's where we're leading to right here now. Now let me ask you this, Michael. Are these people Hispanic or are they Latin? I really want to know the real bottom line. What is these people, what is their language? Hispanic or Latin?
It's certainly not Latin.
Certainly not. So what is it?
It's variations on Spanish.
On Spanish.
Portuguese,
so Arabic,
yeah.
Is it Arabic? Is it Hispanic? What is it?
Arabic is a minority language in this country, as is Chinese. But yeah, okay. Right now, if there were to be adopted a second language in this country the way they do in Canada, it would probably be Spanish.
Okay, well, you know what, Michael, what I saw last night at the debate, watching a few minutes of that nonsensical, those nincompoops, as Buttigieg, Mayor Peter, was saying basically that Bernie's a big-time Bolshevik communist, Bloomberg's a capitalist pig. I mean, this is the most interesting thing I ever saw watching these morons talking last night about, and this guy, Buttigieg, is going around telling the Christians how they're immoral. Who is this guy Buttigieg talking about immorality of the Christian who vote for Trump?
Well, wait a minute. I mean, I don't know about ordinary mom and pop, my next door neighbor Christians, but certainly the clergy are incredibly corrupt. I mean, there are more and more scandals of embezzlement from church funds. There's the child molestation scandal. Yeah, they may talk a good talk about morality, but they don't walk the talk, in other words.
Oh, you know what? You're correct there, Michael. But guess what? If you pick up the Old Testament or read the New Testament, he's not going by the Bible either. And like you say, all these criminal clergy, they're not going by the word that's written in the Bible. So you know what? These people are nothing but hypocritical liars. I mean, it's blasphemy what they're trying to pull off. And I'm not saying all Republicans are great either. Believe me. But what the Democrats are trying to do to this country and day in and day out with all this nincompoop stuff, it's mind-boggling. It really is. And like I said, Michael, we know the big date's coming up. I think it's the 22nd. Have you found out anything about the two Corys or anything about that situation?
Just waiting to see what he comes out with. There hasn't been anything more about that. I want to get on back to the debates here because I'll be very honest. I didn't see anybody on that stage, anybody that I would care to vote for.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They want to flood the country of 100 million more. Look, Michael, something that you talked about on your show. These Democrats, they want a Green New Deal. They talk about the weather, the environment, on all this. And like I told you 2 weeks ago, this country can't have sustained over 380 million people. These people want to bring 1 billion people in here. These Democrats. They want to bring a billion people in this country.
1 billion, that's 3 times our current population.
That's what they like to do, the Democrats. And
this nation can't support that population.
Well, I believe that's what's going on in China. I don't think China can support 1 billion people. I don't think India is going to be able to support 1.5 billion people, 2 billion people in the next 50 years. They can't afford it. They can't support it. And that's why you look at Europe, Michael, like you're saying, Europe has fallen. France, Germany, England. These countries are all fell off their rocker. They lost their cultural identity. They have another culture came in there that's invaded the place, bringing their mosque and everything. I mean, this is total invasion. And nobody's actually really, and politics is doing anything about it. They're letting this guy Soros run ramshot all over Europe and the United States. George Soros, that old fart. And he's with his buck. I mean, if Bloomberg wants to really say he loves America, why doesn't he take some of his money and fight Soros? Two Jews going at it. You know,
that's why you're not going to see it. It's a religious prohibition.
Like really going after Bernie. You're not going to see Bernie and Bloomberg really going at it. Behind the scenes, they're drinking lattes and talking about Kabbalah. Who knows what they're doing? But they're all liars, nincompoops, and they've totally trying to wipe out Christianity as we know it in this country, and the Christian white males who made this the greatest country on earth in history, starting with George Washington. And, you know,
okay,
it's just not.
I want to correct you on something that you said a little while ago about how China couldn't support 1 billion people. Their current population is 1.386 billion. The population of India is 1.339 billion. They're catching up with China. And the United States population is only 325 million. But if you look at how overcrowded our cities are right now and how strained the food supply system is, we can't take 1 billion people. I mean, the nation would collapse before they got that far.
No, Michael, I totally agree with you. I 100% agree with that. That, like I told your show, in China, if I'm not mistaken, in China they have over 100, I think it's 130 million more men and women. So they have factories turning out robots for the men. I mean, is that real? I don't know. I don't really do the research on that, but is there 100 million more men in China than there is women? What is that?
Yeah, because men were considered more valuable, and while they don't do it anymore, there was a practice in China for a lot of years of simply, how do we put this delicately, disposing of female children. And, you know, but look on the bright side, a robot can't sue you for divorce and take half your possessions.
Well, absolutely true. And you know what? If they can make the robots half as good looking as like Cindy Crawford types, why not? Give it a shot. I don't know. It's crazy, Michael. I've never seen, this world's going off the chain, man. But seriously, I just got to say, you know, watching that debate for 15 minutes, I watched it. I couldn't stop but laughing, listening to these communist Bolsheviks tearing each other up. It was just amazing. And then on top of it, I switched over and watched Trump's speech. And you know, did you hear the people when Biden was speaking, Michael, and they were booing Biden at the end?
Yes. Well, I have a comment about that because I was watching on MSNBC last night. And there was one point where somebody was talking, I forget who, and, you know, on the soundtrack was all this cheering and clapping, and the video director made the mistake of having a camera pan the audience, and they were all just sitting there. So MSNBC was sweetening the soundtrack with canned cheers and canned applause.
Oh, absolutely. Those people on MSLSD are just totally, they're Bolsheviks too, Michael. All the cabal of the ABC, NBCs, and CBS, they're a bunch of big cabal Bolsheviks who want to take over the United States. That's why I look at it. They really want to take over this country. They're going to go after our guns, full grunt. They're going to try to get the guns, but they'll never happen. They're going to be totally exposed on, I believe, starting Saturday. It's all going to unravel for them big time. They're really going to be exposed, these demon rats. I'm telling you, you're going to be exposed like you never believe. It's coming. Their day of reckoning is coming. So we'll see. It's all going to be interesting how it plays out. But, Michael, one thing I'll say, yesterday I was telling you about what's going on here in South Florida. They literally have a whole group of people are doing voodoo, witchcraft. Okay?
Yes. Well, that's been going on for a long, long time.
Okay, right. And you got places here in South Florida, Michael, if you go up over to the railroad tracks, you'll see dead animals all over the place. Stinking smell, dead animals, chickens, goats, you name it. It's unbelievable. And this is what these Democrats want for this country, Michael? Seriously?
Okay, real quick question, because we're almost out of time here. There's another religion in that part of the country. It begins with an S. It's like Santori, I think it's called.
Santeria,
and they're the ones,
Santeria.
Santeria. And they're the ones who are really big into animal sacrifice. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Tom, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we were talking about how the Navy is building a drone ship fleet. They've already built one that just completed an automated, fully automated, no human crew trip from San Diego to Hawaii, all under the control of its onboard computer systems. And that is impressive. Let's be very honest, that is very impressive. Okay, apparently on the new level of military enlistment, in the Army's fiscal year 2021 budget request, they're looking to add 1,000 more soldiers, 100 of whom will transfer to the United States Space Force. Now they're trying to put that one together, and 100 probably going to be used more for staffing and low-level maintenance of whatever facility they're going to be building. So it's off to a slow start, but have no doubt it will soon join the ranks of other cash sinks that are used to drain the wealth of the American people so that we're helpless against the rich. Speaking of rich, let's talk about the economy for a little bit. Over the past 2 weeks, options traders spent more than $16 billion with a B buying speculative calls. That's 60% more than any other 2-week period since 2000. In other words, they're getting desperate and they're starting to take desperate chances, trying to just keep the profits rolling on in. And they can't find good, solid, steady return investments. So they're going on. They're basically degenerating into gambling. Sometimes they'll be up and sometimes they'll be down until they hit what's called gambler's ruin. Now, statisticians like to talk about gambling and saying, well, there's so many odds this way, so many odds that way. But what happens when you bet it all and you run out of money? You stop. That is a big reason why the house is always going to win in places like Las Vegas. It's called gambler's ruin. All right. Why is the Fed reluctant to let the boom-bust nature of markets play out? Because that's what they've always done since 1913. Once you're in power, you're going to do what you can to defend the system as it is. Gold, meanwhile, has reached an all-time record of over $1,500 per ounce, meaning that the US dollar has sunk to a new record low relative to gold. It's entirely possible it's going to break over $1,600 per ounce. Silver surges to $18.44 an ounce. Folks, if you have not already done so, invest part of your investment portfolio in silver and gold. It's going to hold its value, unlike the equities. I mean, look what happened to Macy's the other day, declared to be junk status and their stock plunged. Stocks can plunge to zero. In fact, there's actually a collector's market of stock certificates from companies that have gone bust. Gold will never go bust. Silver will never go bust. It is a great preserver of your wealth. Okay? I invested in some gold coins once. I learned the hard way that they lose their value if you eat the chocolate bit out of the middle. Okay, HSBC is warning of 35,000 more job cuts. Janet Yellen is out there saying the Fed should buy stocks when the market crashes. Well, they tried that back in 1929. All right, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we take this next phone call, I got an email here responding to Andy in Texas saying, yes, the U.S. lost and asked the corporations left in those countries, how many remained in Iran after the Iranians rebelled against the U.S. in 1979? Are there any left? Precious few, I would imagine. All right, let's go to the phones to Roger in Ohio. Aloha, Roger. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I've been watching YouTube, and we got interesting YouTube on here. I don't know if you ever heard of Caitlin Bennett. She's kind of like a Mark Dice kind of person.
Yes.
And it's caused leftist riot against Caitlin Bennett at Ohio University. I guess her thing is Liberty Hangout, what her website is. But it's, I kind of wish that I hope Trump doesn't run again. We don't need a civil war with all these crazy people. And
well,
I'm kind of rooting for Bernie because I don't want Hillary in there either. But, you watch these students at Ohio U, and it is scary.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. It's college is not what it was when I went. And, even during the height of the Vietnam War, there was much less violence on the campuses than we're seeing now.
When Obama got elected, I wasn't very happy about it. But I didn't have pictures of him with his head cut off or threatening to kill his wife or his children or act like these people act. I mean, what is wrong with people nowadays? What's wrong with them?
They've been desensitized to violence, and partly it's because we've got a violent government. The police are being violent. We're seeing deliberate creation of factions in our society to keep us angry with each other so we don't unite and become angry with the federal government. And that's how they maintain their control. But that only works for so long, because sooner or later society from those pressures.
Well, I think, you know, we have a very fragile economy, and with this thing going on in China, they could be, I don't know that they'd be doing it on purpose, but when Trump assassinated the number 2 guy from Iran, I think he more or less made them decide that they're going to have to do something. And if they
I'm glad that cooler heads have prevailed there, because that was the whole point of starting to assassinate key people, was to provoke Iran into doing something that the U.S. media could say, oh, that's the cause for the war here. Iran did this, Iran did that, Iran is bad. We must respond.
Yeah, and I think they could very easily throw this country in a really bad recession very easily. And by them not shipping stuff over here, it's pretty bad. You know, I'm the same age as you are, and I'm too old to be fighting.
Me too.
I don't know where you're going to head to. I don't know if you're going to stay in Indiana, but you know, there's not a day that doesn't go by where I say I got to get out of here.
Well, when we decided to leave Hawaii, Claire and I talked about that, if we wanted to go to a foreign country. There was actually a time years ago where I was offered a permanent job at an Australian production company, and they offered to help me become an Australian citizen. And I came that close to accepting. And at the last second, I said, no, I'm an American. There are problems with America. I'm going to go back to my country, and I'm going to try and fix it. And at this point, at our age, I doubt any other countries would take Claire and I in, because we're at that age right now where we're more of a drain on the economy than a contributor.
Well, I don't know. It's Panama's looking pretty good right now. Costa Rica, I used to go down there a lot, but that's very expensive, and they let over 1 million Nicaraguans in their country, and they just had a thing. I don't know if it was on Yahoo, where this woman got knifed to death by some Nicaraguan that just showed up. So, you know, there's 20% of the population is Nicaraguan now, and they're kind of violent people. So they made them a level 2 already. So,
well, look at what the U.S. was doing to Nicaragua all these years. I mean, you know, that's a big reason these people are so violent. They've been brutalized by American intervention.
Well, they've always kind of had a history of being more violent, so I don't know why, but maybe compared to Costa Rica, they look more violent. But it's pretty scary. I don't know what the world's going to end up, but I listen to Rick Wiles every day and the healthmasters.com, and listen to your show and Brent's show. So, you know, I try to stay informed and connect the dots and everything else. So, well, I'll let you go. You have a wonderful day. Hey, we've had a great winter this year.
Everyone around here is saying it's very, very mild winter for Indiana, but they're expecting snow tonight. So we'll see what happens with that. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Dan in Washington State. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. I got 2 topics. But since you guys brought up relocation, I've been thinking about that myself. And the hard part is trying to find a country that isn't ruled by a Rothschild central bank, I guess. Because unless you can escape that, you can't really escape the system, as far as I can tell. You know, where can you go? Like, if you go to Australia, it seems like it's the same kind of power running it. You know what I mean? Maybe Argentina or something. So I thought about Argentina, and if I was on Social Security, you could still get your check every month and just live over there. But you'd lose your check if everything went to crap. But just an idea. You know? I had a question for you with gold and silver. If you buy gold and silver, can you tell if it's real? I mean, is there a metal detector or something? If you is there big cases of people buying gold coins that are, you know, not chocolate inside, but not real? Have you ever heard of that?
there's a big problem with tungsten cord fake bars and tungsten cord fake gold coins, and the first thing you can do is only do business with a reputable dealer that's been around for a while, because if they're selling fakes, it will come back to haunt them. Some dealers now have these little what they call these sound X-ray machines, these ultrasound machines that are used on pregnant women and such. But if you put them onto a gold coin or a gold bar, the boundary between the gold and the tungsten will show up, and you'll know immediately it's a fake without having to actually physically harm the coin or the bar.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking if they had something like that. I've never, because I thought, I hear a lot of advertisements on this great network and Ranch Network, and I like to support the sponsors, but then most of them, I guess, are reputable. But it would be nice to be able to test, maybe buy one and test it, and then, or you could test them on your own if you could.
Well, you can always take it someplace and, you can have them drill out just a tiny sample of the metal and have it assayed. That's how they found out about the tungsten cores over in Germany. They were drilling into the bar to get a sample for assay, and they hit the tungsten and broke the drill.
Huh. I didn't hear about that. Okay. Yeah, it's all right. That was my one topic. And real quick, before I go, Edward Snowden did a video on YouTube. It's how he secures his cell phone. And it's on there, I think, on YouTube. I think it might have been an RT story, but he did like but he basically says you got to crack it open, and he goes in and physically disconnects the camera and all these things that, kind of above my pay grade. But I agree with you. I think I have a friend that wanted me to download a encryption, software. But I just still feel like it's at the base of the phone. So if they want to track you, even with whatever encryption or hide your IP, I think they can track you still, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, if you're going someplace and you need to take your cell phone, as opposed to simply leaving it at home, which is the best way not to be tracked, you need to get a metal radio-proof case, or at the very least wrap it in like 6 layers of aluminum foil to block all the signals going in and out. And never use encryption that is provided over the internet or from a commercial operation, because they're all backdoored by the NSA. But as I showed in my article, Rivero challenges the NSA. You can write your own encryption if you're a moderately decent programmer. And, I do have my own encryption set up to use, and then I realized I really don't have anybody I communicate with that I need to keep the communication secret, because it's all eBay orders or Amazon orders or things like that. And I really lead a very tame and colorless life, and I don't really have any secrets. So it sits there collecting dust.
Yeah, that's kind of what I told him. And I mean, they can see, it's just worry, because I actually had some phone issues with Verizon, and they locked my phone out. And it was a big mess between they got reported for fraud, which was not fraud. And by the time I got it all, they would not remove my phone from that fraud list. And he just basically kept reading their terms of service, like video chat, or kind of accusing me of what I've done. And the guy was in the Philippines, and they don't tell you why they disconnected that phone. Like, he acted like I was running some kind of telemarketing thing out of my phone or something, and all I do is call basically talk shows, so yeah. I was afraid that they might be trying to go after the listeners of shows by somehow saying you're violating the terms of service of the group chat. He was saying group chat, but he wouldn't tell me what it was, so I have no idea. But it's just kind of was scary, like they're kind of bringing this Chinese kind of credit system where they might just say, we're going to cut your phone off, and well, but there's no way around it. I mean, I don't think you can download anything, because if the carrier has the info, I think it's hardwired in. Even with the speaker, they could tell what you're saying, hardwired in with how the speaker works.
It's all hardwired. Yeah, it's all built into the phones at the point of manufacture at this point. And again, there are ways to encrypt what you're sending before it even gets to the phone if you have the appropriate tape recording equipment or digital recording equipment. Tape recording, I'm giving my age away here. Anyway, listen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here and go to Kevin in West Virginia. Kevin, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mr. Mike. I have a few things on my mind. The first thing was an assessment or something that I feel is going on. Do you feel that the political left and the political right don't even what I want, I feel like they're not even political, that they're cultural parties. And that's why I feel like there's so much a divide, because it's cultural problem. Do you follow what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I do. And I think you have a valid point there, because if you look at the conservative population and the liberal population, they're definitely living by two different sets of values.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why one of the things, I mean, I've said it before, I feel like we've reached the apex of divide, but I want to walk that statement back. You know, we're being more and more and more and more divided. Like, I thought it wouldn't get any worse. And I hear people calling your radio show, you know, oh, I'm going to support Bernie. And I'm like, how can you support somebody that wants to throw you into a camp because you're white and a male? Like, how do you, I don't understand the concept of how somebody can support that. Like, that just blows my mind. I mean, it's just...
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Where did Bernie Sanders say that?
It was his Project Veritas, his campaign people saying how we want to put people in white males in re-education camps.
Were they really his people? Because were they really his people? And the reason I ask that is I'm looking at these so-called Bernie brothers who are going out and committing acts of violence, and it doesn't feel like something that Bernie himself would support. And having lived through the Nixon era, I'm very sensitive to the idea of dirty political tricks, which is what this feels like.
You know what? And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, you know, I mean, somebody running a presidential campaign, these Bernie brothers, I don't see how he could get behind and support his people like that, or people that follow him. And so I'm wondering if it's synthetic in nature, or synthetic at its genesis too. I mean, so I think you're onto something. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the coronavirus.
Yes.
Do you watch Dr. Boyle? I think that's his name. The guy that wrote the he's come out and said that this is absolutely a weapon, and it started that some of the components came out of Fort Detrick, which is really, really close to my house. We sold this weapon. I don't understand why you would sell your... Say that again?
I said, I hope you're upwind.
I think I am. I'm not. I think they're south of me. I think Frederick is south of me, or that area is south of me. Pretty sure it is. Okay. But my question though is, why would you sell so-called enemy a biological weapon that could take us out? I don't. Even if you're that greedy for money, I mean, does common sense come into play here at all?
Well, I don't think they sold a completed bioweapon. I think they sold a component. And the fact of the matter is, looking at the way COVID-19 is operating, I don't think it was a completed bioweapon. I think it was a work in progress. And that somebody, you know, dropped a test tube at that BSL-4 lab in Wuhan.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I was wondering, you know, was this accidentally released, or was this intentional release? Well, I guess it really doesn't matter. But I mean, you know, is this hype that I'm seeing? Is this real, or we have a problem on our hands, or is this more or less like what happened with SARS and MERS? Get the vaccine, get the vaccine. Okay, so you feel it's more of that?
We don't really know, and it could be just more of that. You know, and they're doing a full court press to try and scare everybody into rushing off to their doctor and getting whatever vaccine it is they're getting ready to sell us. It could be that. Sooner or later, something real is going to come along. But as I said before, as a biological weapon, COVID-19 is not very good. And so I'm leaning toward the accidental release of a work in progress.
I think you're right. I think it was a work in progress. I mean, and of course, I think they're developing or trying to develop something a little bit more nasty than like that is. Like, I agree with you that it's not a real good biological weapon. I mean, with the gains of function, you need a weapon that infects quickly, but also has a pretty good, kill rate. Or even just takes people out of the game for a sec.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Biological weapons have to have high secondary communicability unless you've got a massive distribution system. I mean, the reason the U.S. stores so much anthrax is it has a low secondary communicability, which means they can spray a battlefield with it from numerous airplanes and make all the soldiers sick so they can't fight, but it's not going to infect their own troops. This thing, unfortunately, because it appears to have a moderately high secondary communicability, it's you can depopulate a continent with it, but you can't control it on the battlefield. So I think they were looking at the COVID-19 virus as possibly a foundation for something, that they harvested from the bats. And we do know there was one incident with a researcher who got into an altercation with one of the bats and was splashed with the bat's blood. So that's all it takes.
And I have one other thing, a cultural point. Last week when Trump was at the Daytona 500, and that big wreck with Ryan Newman. I don't know if you've seen, He was released a couple of days ago, but people on Twitter
He's a lucky man.
were going saying, that they were saying, we're glad that he's hurt, this and that. It just goes to show you how sick the left is, that they would want harm to come to a driver for shaking Trump's hand. It just blows my mind that everything that this man does, your Democratic left, or people who lean left or whatever, they want harm done, and it just, when is enough saying, all right, I'm going to give you what you want. You want to fight, you got one. I mean, when is it, like, I don't want a civil war in this country. I don't think we can stop one. I think it's going to happen regardless. I don't want to see it, but I think it's going to be in your big city and not in your rural area.
All right, well, listen,
That's
Kevin,
all I
we
had
got to
to
Well, good. Timing is perfect because we have to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a reminder that Republic Broadcasting is in the middle of a fundraising drive. And the situation is, shall we say, stressed. And a big thank you to those of you who've already donated, and a basically down on my knees plea to those who have not. And I'd get down on my knees, but getting back up would be problematic. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And the phone number for a credit card or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you, and I thank you for your continued support for both RBN and WhatReallyHappened.com. Because we don't have the big money being poured all over us the way the corporate media does. Okay, we were talking about the economic news here, and apparently there is a oil glut and a gas glut as demand shrinks, especially in countries like China, where everybody's just staying home and they're hunkered down. And international expansion in Australia, Qatar, Mozambique, and Egypt, combined with the continuously strong U.S. shale gas export drive, is pushing down prices further. Good for the consumers, bad for the LNG companies. Analysts have warned before that a possible LNG glut could end in tears, but nobody was expecting the market would also be hit by demand-side shocks such as China's COVID-19. The last couple of weeks, major LNG export cargoes to China have been diverted to other clients or are still looking for a destination in an already woefully oversupplied market. Okay, big problem over in China. As China grinds to a halt, firms pay workers. The workers are in the factories making the products, but the products cannot be delivered to their end market, which means payments are not showing up. And yeah, it's getting close to sort of a trigger point. The COVID-19 outbreak has left many businesses on the brink of disaster. So if COVID-19 is a deliberate attack, if you will, who benefits from that? The FDA is now bracing for drug and medical supply shortages from China. Apparently, a lot of pharmaceuticals and a lot of medical supplies, masks, thermometers, things like that, are made in China, and we can't get them now. Every week, its economic disintegration is not reversed. China is triggering the most massive supply chain shock the world has seen since the last financial crisis, now spreading from east to west. The next impact won't just be Europe, which we've already mentioned, the closure of a Fiat Chrysler automobile plant in Serbia. It will be America, and it could be first in the form of drug and medical supply shortages. The FDA warns we are keenly aware that the outbreak will likely impact the medical product supply chain, including potential disruptions to supplier shortages of critical medical rented libs products in the U.S. So the downside of globalism. Problem in one country quickly becomes everybody else's problem. Bix Weir is out there saying the markets continue to rise, ... as the end game approaches. Stock markets got a mouse click boost in the pre-market trading. Steve Mnuchin must have woken up early this morning and had a premature mouse click. Nothing can stop the end game from coming now. Nothing. And we don't know when it's going to hit. We had that caller the other day who was out there saying, well, when is it going to happen? We don't know, because the other side can change the rules whenever they want, or they can crank up the printing presses. And nobody wants to crash this economy. The problem is they've got it into a condition where crash is now inevitable. It's only a question of when. They're going to do everything they can to at least make it look like it's ticking along. Okay. Trump's war on Huawei devolves to a cringeworthy embarrassment for the U.S., and this is mostly predicated upon Great Britain's refusal to exclude Huawei from its 5G broadband network. And this has got nothing to do with security. I saw another story on Fox News about, well, China could spy on all our phone calls. Isn't that the job of the U.S. government? Well, yes, that's exactly the point. No, this is all about market share. This is all about markets for American manufacturers of 5G equipment, who right now are finding it hard to compete with the much less expensive and very often higher quality products coming out of China. It's about money. It's about sales. It's about creating a monopoly. Huawei just lowered the price of their chipsets by 30%, and that is a price point the American companies cannot compete with. So we're not the manufacturing nation that we used to be. We make stuff that's very expensive and it's not as good. Freight shipments here in the U.S. have plunged 9.4%. That's the steepest since 2009, the year after the home mortgage-backed security fraud went kaboinga. Over in the European Union, auto registrations plunge. People concerned about the coronavirus, they're not buying cars. Everybody is hunkering down, saving their money, not sure what's going to happen. Global auto market appears to be in a recession of its own here. Jim Rickards is out there saying China's economy was already slowing. Now it's grinding to a halt. Now, somebody was saying the other day, why are the vaccine makers? We've got to take another break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we've been talking about vaccines and the harm they can cause and their somewhat questionable efficacy. I mean, this year's flu shot totally is for the wrong type of flu. And they've already discovered that if you're given a flu shot for the wrong type of flu, it can actually cause more harm than good. Why do they keep on doing it? Money. It's just money. And according to this article over here in Investment Watch blog, pharmaceutical corporations who produce vaccines will reach an estimated $61 billion, that's with a B, in profits this year. $61 billion in profits. Now remember, the CDC is not part of the government. The CDC is a private corporation that owns patents on numerous vaccines. That's why they're always out there saying, oh yes, you should definitely get all these vaccines here. And every year they come out with more and more vaccines that children are required to have in order to go to school. So anyway, getting on to immigration and refugees and so forth. The Immigration Customs Enforcement has been reporting lately that the number of people trying to cross our border is in decline, which is good news. So where are all these people going? They're now going to Canada. Well, I hate to be rough on our northern neighbors there, but better them than us right now. We've already suffered enough from this. Maybe the Canadians will take a tougher stand. I really think that they ought to here. Meanwhile, here in this country, down in Florida, a Mexican national has been arrested and charged as being a Russian agent for spying on an FBI informant in Florida. And we just let this guy come across border here. Mexican citizen named Hector Alejandro Cabrera Fuentes was charged Tuesday with being an unregistered foreign agent for Russia after he was stopped attempting to fly out of Miami International Airport. Okay, apparently there is a major operation to deal with the meth crisis, which is a good thing. That stuff is very, very dangerous, and so are the people who are taking it. It's not like the pot smokers who just mellow back and listen to music and they're harmless. The meth heads, they just get wild here. I saw a lot of that when I lived in North Hollywood. Okay, let's talk about computers and so forth right now. Apparently, details of 10.6 million MGM hotel guests were posted on a hacking forum. This is the personal details of anybody who stayed at MGM Resorts hotels. And besides details for regular tourists and travelers, included in the leaked files were also personal and contact details for celebrities, tech CEOs, reporters, government officials, and employees at some of the world's largest tech companies. ZDNet verified the authenticity of the data today, together with a security researcher from Under the Breach, a soon-to-be-launched data breach monitoring service. Well, that's definitely an idea whose time has come. The United States is the world spying champion. That's why it's fighting the simple fix to China's spying fears. You're concerned about, Huawei listening in on phone calls? Allow the public to use unbreakable encryption. That would solve it. But of course, the problem with that is if it's unbreakable to the Chinese, it's unbreakable to the United States. So the United States is trying to have a monopoly. They want to spy on you. They already do. They listen to you through your cell phones. They watch you through the cell phone cameras. They're listening to you through your little assistant, your voice-activated assistant in your home. They're watching you through the Ring doorbells, but they don't want anybody else to do it. And they got away with it for a lot of years. I mean, the CIA and the NSA were out compromising everybody else's encryption system, like the big scandal over crypto AG, but they don't want anybody else to have that capability. Well, too bad. In this age of computerization, unbreakable codes are a fact of life. And again, we proved that with my article, Rivero Challenges the NSA. So there's a 1950s mindset that's behind all of this right now. They're not really dealing with the reality of living in the 21st century. Apparently, there's a new malware out that makes ATMs spit out all their money. There's something that might be useful. And potentially this can affect any country in the world. Okay, apparently there is a story which is now being denied, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Trump supposedly offered to pardon Julian Assange if he denied Russia helped leak the Democrats' emails. This is coming from his lawyer, and it's already being denied. Well, see, we already know Russia had nothing to do with it. Couldn't have been a hack over the internet because the timestamps on the files show that it was copied to a flash drive, probably a USB 3.0. And then it was walked out of the building, more than likely by Seth Rich, who was then murdered in what the police still insist was a botched robbery, because whoever shot and killed him didn't take his wallet, didn't take his cell phone, didn't take the gold chain he was wearing around his neck. Now, the other day over in Virginia, Governor Northam's assault weapon ban was voted down. And the reason it lost is 4 of the Democrats voted with the Republicans to say this is a bad idea. Well, the Virginia legislature is now out there exacting their revenge. Oh my goodness, their revenge. Democrats in the Virginia House of Delegates killed a bill that had been introduced by one of the state senators who joined Republicans to vote against a separate bill that would have banned assault weapons in the state. And what they did is the House panel was discussing a bill introduced by State Senator Chap Peterson, which had passed unanimously in the Senate. And this was a bill that would allow part-time law enforcement officers to purchase their surface firearms when they retired. Currently, full-time officers can purchase their firearms once they retire. Now, Amy Friedenberger, state capitol correspondent for the Roanoke Times, reported many of the people who were present when the bill was being discussed in the House suggested it was killed because Peterson had voted against Governor Ralph Northam's gun ban proposal. Friedenberger even suggested gun control advocates liked Peterson's bill. All right. Getting on over to ClimateGate and thus and such, there is an article that came out of henrymakov.com on how Greta Thunberg is actually being manufactured by the green tech industry. Remember, the more the hysteria about human-caused global warming is fanned up, the more people will pour money into windmills and solar systems and so forth and so on, which, by the way, if they can make it work reliably and efficiently, and cost effectively, I have no objection to any of these technologies. But unfortunately, in the hysteria of human-caused global warming, a lot of stuff is being sold that is not reliable, that breaks down, and it's shoddy. It's very shoddy. The shoddy United States of America manufacturing strikes again. So apparently, Greta Thunberg is backed by a number of Swedish and Swiss venture capital funds focused on investing in green technologies that are struggling to find companies to invest in. Most of these companies require initial government funding. Okay. Greta was chosen from a number of young Swedish girls to represent their interests, trained and given information to start espousing because, of course, she has no scientific expertise herself. They wanted a female child as their symbol. She was the perfect spokesperson, also because she's on the autism spectrum, and that would build even more sympathy. Oh, how could you challenge Greta? I mean, she's a girl, she's a young girl, and she's ill. How could you dare say anything opposed to her ideas? Okay, a powerhouse marketing firm out of Germany was hired to design and implement a marketing strategy for her to gain worldwide attention. They did, and it worked. She gained worldwide attention and addressed the United Nations. The 500 scientists from around the world who sent a letter to the UN did not gain an audience. Okay, Greta has slammed my generation and generations previously. We stole her childhood, or such is the claim. This is a script written for her by the German marketing firm. Her childhood is like it is because of the sacrifice of a previous generation, many of whom lie buried in the fields of Europe. Then she also gets used again by the Canadian political leaders for photo ops. The fact that she got FaceTime with Trudeau should be aberrant to Canadians. Okay, she led a school protest march in Canada where, again, photo op greedy politicians take part. Her ability to protest rests solely the sacrifice of other generations, including Edith Cavell, whom she chastises. She's a front. She's a front for a money-making operation. For that matter, so was Al Gore. All right, a small New York town of roughly 16,000 people has rebuffed their local library, which had planned to host a drag queen story hour event. Now, apparently, it's a fight between the library and the public, whose taxes support that library. I would like to point that out. Apparently, this is getting really ugly, where the drag queens are out there saying, we have a right to talk to your children, and fill their heads with all kinds of nonsense about doubting their gender. These kids are too young to understand gender and sexuality. The hormones haven't kicked in yet. Anyway, now this is an interesting story, and it got play on the corporate media news. Apparently, a professional English violinist, Dagmar Turner, had to undergo an operation to remove a brain tumor at King's College Hospital in London. And the doctors said, we want to not damage the region of her brain responsible for playing the violin. So they had her play the violin during her own brain surgery, because the brain itself has no pain receptors. You have to get through the scalp and the skull, and you can do that with a local anesthetic. But once you're into the brain itself, you don't feel any pain. Apparently it worked, and there was a video of her playing the violin, and Good for her and good for those doctors. It's nice to hear that. Okay. Vatican police raid top cleric's home and office over a London property scam. And apparently they raided the office and residence of the investment manager of the Vatican Secretariat of State Tuesday morning, seized documents and computer equipment as part of an ongoing probe into the financial scandal involving the purchase of a London property worth $220 million. The search was ordered by promoter of justice Gian Piero Milano and deputy Alessandro Didil on the premises of Monsignor Alberto Perlasca, former head of the administrative office of the first section of the Secretariat of State. They got very, very long names over there. Perlasca headed the office responsible for managing Vatican investments and for overseeing the administration of the Peters Pence Fund. On July 26th of last year, Pope Francis appointed him promoter of justice in the Supreme Tribunal of Apostolic Signature. Say that 3 times fast. Chief prosecutor of the Vatican Supreme Court. Meanwhile, over in Richmond, Virginia, the diocese is agreeing to compensate childhood victims of clergy sexual abuse only if they agree to never sue the diocese. So they're getting a little preemptive here. And the diocese headed by Bishop Harry Nestout launched its independent reconciliation program. And a protocol of the program stimulates that a victim or claimant in signing the agreement or release forever surrenders the right to have the abuse case publicly litigated in court. So now they're trying to buy the silence of the victims, which as long as the victims get compensated, I don't really have a problem with because the scandal has become public anyway. All righty, getting close to the end of the program here. Getting on back to the Trump-Assange pardon tale, Dana Rohrabacher is trying to debunk the story that Trump offered Assange a pardon to exonerate the Russians for any role in the leakage of the Democratic emails. But apparently, in a roundabout way, was trying to confirm it, at least according to Michael Isikoff over at Yahoo News. All righty. Warning signs suggest Chinese tech shipments are about to crash. And Jimmy Dore was out there saying the corporate media is not telling the truth about Julian Assange and President Trump. So apparently this is going back and forth. Classic case of he said, he said, he said, he said, he said. Now, given the reality that we're heading into a new ice age, ice-breaking ships become more and more important, and Russia builds the best of them. In fact, they build nuclear-powered icebreakers. Good application for nuclear energy, I think, because they need a lot of power to cut through the ice, and they're very far away from being refueled. And apparently 2 of them met in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. They called it cuddling up. I'm sure they didn't really make contact, but they got really close to each other. And I'm sure the crews waved at each other, and who knows, maybe some visited the other ship. But they do make these magnificent icebreakers, and they're really good. I remember when there was this big thing about 2 whales, a mother and her whalelet, that were trapped at this hole in the ice, and they couldn't reach the open sea because of an ice barrier. And it was a big thing. The news went global, and the locals were out there every day with chainsaws trying to keep the hole from freezing over. And ultimately, it was a Russian icebreaker that saved the situation because it rammed the ice wall and caused it to collapse. And that opened a channel for the whales to, well, one of them died. It opened a channel for one of the whales to escape back to the sea. At which point, I'm sure the Japanese whalers were saying, oh, goody, let's go for that one here. And now I don't have a problem with seafood. I love shrimp. I love clams, especially New England fried clams. But the sentient, intelligent life forms I have a problem with. I would never eat whale meat. I would never eat cephalopods, octopus or squid, because they're intelligent creatures, and I respect intelligence. You know, dumb life forms, yeah, let's eat them. I had somebody get on my case the other day about, well, you can't eat beef because cows are so destructive of the environment and they're putting out methane that's causing global warming and everything. So I'm trying to deal with the problem. I'm eating those cows as fast as I can. Okay. Apparently, according to Kevin Shipp, Trump is frustrated about unprosecuted deep state crimes. And yeah, I would be too. He made a comment today during this press conference about Roger Stone that, he's trying to drain the swamp, but it turned out to be a lot deeper than he expected. Well, yeah, I could have kind of told you that they're going on in. That's Trump's biggest mistake. He didn't hire me as an advisor for the White House. So, news thing coming in over my watch. I do like my iWatch. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of today's show after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, our last segment of our program today. And we have some very, very bright people who listen to this show. And I'm looking at this email. As a Canadian, I have to admit I'm a bit confused. For one thing, why is Biden even still considered to be in the running? In Iowa, he lost to a communist, a gay man, and a fake Indian. Face it, Biden lost to the Village People. From what I can see, he's never recovered. Is it all about money? Even there, his coffers don't seem to be all that high, yet he keeps on losing. Just curious. Yeah, the Village People. That's a great line here. All righty, over in Great Britain, they're imposing a new skill-based immigration system. In other words, you're not going to be allowed in unless you possess a skill that is useful to the British economy. I think that's a very mature policy to have. We should have the same thing here in the United States. They show up at the border, you say, what are your special skills? And some guy from MS-13 says, well, I can extort money, sell drugs, and shoot people. And they would say, okay, you're in. You're going to get a job at the Central Intelligence Agency. I love this story that came on out from, Mike Bloomberg paid to have his own ass kicked on national TV. All right, we have one final phone call. Mike in Minnesota, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was just listening to you comment about eating different levels of consciousness.
Yes.
In your statement there. I just wanted to say that that plants, all plants, have a level of consciousness. Even plants.
Yes, I know that.
Point of, we know about that. But we can also measure their level of consciousness, like they have instrumentation today where you can have two plants growing next to each other, 5 or 6 months or whatever time, and they can hook up the instrumentation to one plant and measure its output in basic energies and frequencies, and then start pulling the leaves or the petals off of the other plant, and you'll definitely get a reaction from the plant next to it. They can measure that nowadays.
The way that works, and we've seen it like in forests, where if insects infest a single tree, it starts secreting a chemical that blows on the wind, and the other trees that receive that chemical, they start producing, if you will, pesticides in their bark so that they're going to be immune from the, and that's how the messages are carried from plant to plant. It's a chemical communication system.
I don't know, but that still doesn't explain how you separate them, and their frequencies will change, And,
if you put them in airtight containers, the experiment probably will not work. But you just said the two plants are side by side. One of them's hooked up to the instrument.
They grew together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring that out. Thanks.
All right, you got it. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And, of course, we're looking forward to the Nevada caucuses this weekend. They're still not sure that this iPad-based system to reconcile the early voting with the caucuses is going to work. It could be another Iowa. And like I said, our election system is too complicated. It makes it wide open for fraud. And we'll just hope for the best. Already the Nevada Democrats are saying they're not going to promise same-day results. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller's show. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN. Please spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. In fact, call your local radio stations and ask them to call ask them to carry the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please continue to donate. We thank you very much for your financial support during these dark times. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.